listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft and people who play it. Today is December 6th, 2021. I know it's confusing. It's not a Tuesday, but we are recording on a Monday this week. My name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host Jason Lucas. Jason, it's Monday, day before reset. How you doing?
It is. I'm doing well. Glad to be here. We do have kind of an exciting week coming up. I mean, we're not into reset as we speak right now, so we don't have like firsthand experience with stuff, but you know, one of the big pieces of 9.15 that was cool was kind of delayed, not available, you know, immediately at patch launch.
And now everyone's forgotten it existed and that it's coming.
Yeah, right. And we've been waiting for it for, you know, I don't know. I don't remember when the patch came out now. It's been a while. It's been a minute.
Yep.
And so it's here. So there is actually some interesting, variety of stuff to get into this coming reset and next week. So that's pretty awesome if you have time to sit down and play WoW in the midst of, the holiday season ramping up.
Yeah, I'm pretty pumped for it as well. We're talking, of course, about Legion Timewalking, which we'll dive into deeper in the show because it includes the Mage Tower and all those appearances and challenges you want to complete for the achievements and everything like that. So that's coming up on this episode. But before we dive into World of Warcraft stuff, Jason, I want you to give you a chance to update us on ABK, more specifically what Mr. Kotick is up to at the moment.
Actually, there's been a bunch of stuff around Activision Blizzard since we last spoke, the last week or so. First was a little nugget that Mr. Kotick was facing some public pressure to step down from the board of Coca-Cola. He apparently sits on the board of Coca-Cola, which you may know from their variety of soft drink and food products.
Yeah, actually, we had a listener point out that they'd actually written a letter to the board of Coca-Cola asking for him to be removed after finding out he was on it. So we know people, part of our community has actually pushed towards this. So they apparently weren't the only one.
I didn't see any kind of update from Coca-Cola or anything. This was not, the news was reported in sort of a confusing way.
Yeah.
A particular investment group was publicly pressuring Coca-Cola to remove Kotick. It was not Coca-Cola's removing Kotick from their board.
Yeah. It's another one of those cases. This happened a few times now where I wish the headline was actually a thing that was happening and not something that people are pushing for something to happen. Because there's been a few times where it's like, oh, should Bobby Kotick be fired? And you're like, I wish that headline just read Bobby Kotick was fired. You're like, oh, right. Okay, good.
Right. Yeah. And I think some people took it as like, oh, well, then that means he's like, no. As far as I didn't see any other updates beyond that. But still, it's another black eye, for the company, for Activision Blizzard as a whole, and obviously for Kotick's leadership. There was also like a bit of a circus this week. The Game Awards are coming up this week, this Thursday, the 9th. And, Jeff Keighley, who is, I guess, the creator or the EVP or whatever, and host of the Game Awards, sort of mentioned like, about all that Activision Blizzard stuff. Like we don't want to take anything away from the developers, so we're just gonna, he basically in a very cushy language said like they were just gonna ignore it and do the show as normal. As you can imagine, that sparked some outcry, and pretty quickly he was like, actually, Activision Blizzard's not going to be part of the show other than the nominated games.
Yeah, and
this is kind of a big deal because I don't know if you've ever watched the Game Awards, and I pay attention to the Game Awards with varying levels of interest over the years. Like,
it's background noise for me. It's something I put on and then it's on while I do something else. It's not like it's some critical appraisal of gaming as an art form or a hobby or anything like that. It's basically a glitzy media event to do game announcements and show trailers and they hand out these meaningless awards, right? I mean, granted, there's a lot of production value. They get a lot of industry luminaries to participate in the show. It's a big broadcast deal, but it's not like these are like some juried awards that carry some kind of real weight. Gaming is so subjective anyway. It's like, what is the point of this? Everybody's gonna have a different experience with every single game. It's like beyond that, the show is really about selling you next year's games or 2023's games or whatever, and it always has been, in my opinion. It's about like what trailers are going to show this year.
Agreed.
And so, you know, I think rightfully a lot of people are like, Jeff, you have this platform, like you could starve Activision Blizzard out. You don't have to show their trailers. You don't have to do this. And furthermore, you could use your platform and your voice to advocate for a better industry, you know? So it remains to be seen if he's going to actually say anything about it during the broadcast or have anybody speak about it. But we at least know that there's not going to be any plugs for Activision Blizzard games on the show. That's a good start. I mean, you know, you might also, you could extend this to Ubisoft. You could extend this to Sony. You can extend it to many other companies in the industry. I guess at that point, it's like, well, what do you even run trailers for? But it was kind of surprising to see how rapid that turnaround was. And I will check in on Thursday night to see if Jeff actually does the right thing and mention this kind of moment that the game industry is having in terms of like the workers collectively organizing against the way they've been treated historically, which I think people have been ignorant of. Then I think the day after that, or that same day, Raven Software, which is an Activision Blizzard studio, they work on Call of Duty Warzone, they announced mass layoffs for the QA department. They laid off like 12 of their 40 QA people or something in one swoop. And in response, Raven's entire QA department walked out today. Yeah. And their only demand was to give all QA testers, including the ones they just laid off, full-time jobs. Activision Blizzard says they're converting approximately 500 temporary workers to full-time employees in the coming months. Unfortunately, as part of this change, we've also notified 20 temporary workers across studios that their contracts would not be extended. Yeah. To some degree, like contract work, this is part and parcel with accepting contract work, is that you know that you could be, you know, your contract could end, your contract may not be renewed, the circumstances might change, but this is kind of a bad look, I think. I mean, if you're converting all of these temp and contract workers to full time, why are you also laying people off? I mean, it's estimated that a game like Warzone makes about $5 million a day. I think your 40 QA people are probably pretty instrumental in you making that money, and that it's probably worth investing in your QA. So it's weird. It's good that they're doing this, and then also like later on today. This is all today. Later on today, it was announced Treyarch, who works on Call of Duty Vanguard. There's so many Call of Duty products now; it's hard to keep them all straight. I don't even know what the difference between them is, to be completely honest with you. But Treyarch, who, I mean, it's a studio that's been around for a lot of years. You know, they've worked on a lot of games that are well regarded over the years. They announced they're converting all contract and temp positions to full-time employees, which is awesome. That's a huge win. Yeah. But it's overshadowed by the fact that, you know, 30%, give or take, of Raven's QA department was just laid off on Friday, 3 weeks before Christmas, with, you know, no severance or anything. It's not like these people are being taken care of. Right. They're just done. So the cool thing to see is how people across Activision Blizzard Studios are supporting each other. They're communicating with each other. They're publicly pressuring the organizations that employ them, and they are getting wins. You know, is everybody going to have like a perfect employment experience at anywhere they work? Like, no, of course not. But there's a big difference between that and suffering abuse and harassment just to do your job, or the way that the video game industry in particular takes advantage of contract and temp employees, you know, dangling carrots of full-time work and kind of, you know, fudging contracts a little bit so they kind of cut off right when maybe you're in a QA down cycle, and then you can save a bunch of money for a quarter and then you hire everybody back. And, you know, not to mention the pay tends to be not competitive with other industries because gaming is like a prestige industry that people want to work in. You know, a lot of factors here, obviously, but some wins among the losses for the employees. It's nice to see the employees, you know, support each other and take action together. And, you know, we'll see what happens from here. I think moving on from the temp and contract situation is a really good call. A company like Activision Blizzard is, of course, going to lay more people off in the future. It's just the nature of the beast when it comes to the way a big corporation like that works in America in 2021. So it's not like, oh, well, after they do this, they're never going to lay anybody off again. Like, no, we know that that's not the case, but this at least gives employees a little bit more stability and, hopefully a better quality of life while they're working for the company. So,
yeah, I kind of want to, inside this entire thing, focus on the positive of over 500 temporary workers at ActiBliz got full-time jobs. Like, that's massive. Like, that's a huge amount. I want to focus on Treyarch moving, of all of their contracts / temporary positions to full-time employees. Now, the curious thing about that is, does that mean that they are expanding enough that they could actually do that? Or is this like, we're converting all current, contract and temporary positions, but they did something last week that we don't know about, as far as releasing people from contracts or setting end dates for contracts or whatever it is. And the story is just focused on this announcement to convert all of them. We don't know details behind that. But when it comes to laying off the QA, and I'm very glad they took action together to, try and support that and talk about that. You're right, man. It's one of those things that is an industry standard for doing, where you're not inside a direct development cycle where there's a lot to QA. We're going to lay off a bunch of these temporary employees, and then we'll potentially bring them back in 6 months when the next thing is starting to get ready to be QA'd. And so that's not uncommon to see, but that's so much part of the old cycle that it's just, to me, it's like, all right, that's same old. What's the new? And the new here is all of these conversions from temporary to full-time. So I'm really glad that's happening, because that's new. That's part of the fresh stuff that we're seeing.
It's definitely a big win. And I think it's something that wouldn't have happened without the kind of pressure across Activision Blizzard Studios, whether it's in Irvine, whether it's in any of the Activision banner studios, whether it's public pressure. I mean, these changes are happening for a reason. It's not because Activision Blizzard management said, hey, we want to just change these things that we've been making hundreds of millions of dollars off of for the last 20 years. We want to stop doing that. Like, no, that's not why this stuff is changing. It's changing because it's changing because of the employees primarily, and because of other people also pressuring these companies and elevating the employees' voices to make these changes happen. So hopefully, we've actually had like quite a few instances of good news to report over the last like month or so, and I hope that the momentum keeps trending in that direction. It is good to see, and it would be really great if Raven would come to terms with the laid off employees from last week and maybe bring them back on board or give them some kind of a package on the way out.
A package on the way out to me is huge. Something to say, hey, we appreciate what you did, and we would, when the you understand the situation we're in, when the opportunity is correct, here's sort of a, opening for you to come back. So we want to give you something to support you for a bit. We can't pay you full time or pay you a full wage during this period of time, but here's some support package. And obviously when the next product's coming out, we'll be coming your way kind of thing would be that would be nice to hear from them for sure.
It's not like Call of Duty is hurting for cash flow. So
yeah. All right. Well, Jason, World of Warcraft, we'll move back onto that. How was your past week this week? What did you get up to?
It was fun. It was a little light, but it was pretty fun. Only did 2 nights, only did Heroic Raid. We just I didn't have enough signups to do Mythic Night. So, which is fine. I mean, I think we've talked about this previously, recently. Like, I'm just kind of playing it by ear. I'm not trying to put any pressure on anybody, and certainly not any on myself. I just want to communicate, like, what do we feel like doing? What's important to the group, and just kind of go that way. I got to bring along a friend who hadn't actually been in Sanctum of Domination yet on Tuesday night, so that was cool. He got to see first 6 bosses, although Tuesday was a little bit, we were struggling. We only ended up killing 5 bosses in 2 hours that night. I can't really put my finger on why that was. Like, a bunch of people were on alts, and it is sort of why I get a little bit grumpy when everybody wants to bring alts, because it's like reprogging. People have to relearn, how to optimize their tune to get a kill on a particular fight. And I don't want people to not have fun. And I know that, we're going to be in this tier for a while yet, and playing alts and kind of spicing it up a little bit is one way to keep that stuff fresh. But also, it's kind of not fun dying on a boss that you've killed 15 times for, an entire night. So It's kind of a delicate balance to strike. I think Tuesday people were just not really super dialed in. We came back Wednesday and then we killed Painsmith through Sylvanas with really minimal issues and with time to spare. So like, I did kind of mention like, hey guys, tomorrow night let's bring mains and just clean this up because people still want Sylvanas loot. Like we can't get bows out. Daggers are a problem. I would still like some shoulders. I'm still using normal mode raid shoulders for the Dom socket. Like, we just never see it, and we've killed Sylvanas weekly for months now, but and people like swap in their hunters specifically so they can get a shot at the bow, and it's just not there, man. And I don't know. It just feels so bad when you have that key loot on this one boss, especially the Sylvanas fight is, it's a marathon. It's an endurance test, and to kill it week after week and just not get the results it's getting a little old.
Yeah.
But other than that, I two nights of raid means I only really had time to do 2 Keystones. It wasn't a great week with the combo for tanks, but we didn't do terrible, but we didn't get any new 20s either. I think our choices were, the choices that we had realistically at 20 and above were only Spires of Ascension, which just continues to elude us in terms of timing it at 20. It's a very difficult dungeon, and Fortified Week is a tall order, I feel like, for Spires. It was the closest we'd been, but we were still over a minute off. And then our only other choice was Theater of Pain, which was it was a theater of pain. So it's just there's some very punishing trash in there, and when it doesn't die fast, it's there's just no way to speed it up. Yeah. You can't really speed that place up,
and it's tight corridors, and you can't really kite easily, and Yep.
Yeah, it's like the overall difficulty of the dungeon was nowhere near over our head, but we could not do it at a pace necessary to time it when mobs have, the amount of health that they have on Fortified 20. I will say that the necrotic nerf feels amazing. Like there were so many situations last week where I would heroic leap away and I would have 2 seconds left on my necrotic debuff and it would easily fall off and mobs would get back to me and I would then start with a fresh stack, or I could even charge back into the mobs because my debuff fell off so fast that I had plenty of time to do that, benefit from my legendary, and just get back into combat. Shaving those 3 seconds off of that debuff has made a world of difference in terms of kiting and getting that to drop. So that felt really good. It's just, at this point, we're kind of not doing anything except trying to shoot for 20s. Which means I'm not really picking up any rating, even though I have some pretty low rated dungeons on my score. It's like all we're doing is gunning for those portals, and we're making some progress. But last week was challenging. I think this week, if we have time to get some dungeons in, it's probably going to be pretty good. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, we got plenty of time this season, as I keep saying. So so far we got 2 of 8. It would be great to get any more of them if possible, but man, it'd be so cool to finish up this season and then have all of next season to just instantly port to whatever keystone we're doing. Oh, that would be really cool.
Yeah, it would. No, I this past week, I guess 2 things. One is I tried to do a 23, I think was what I was trying to do key wise last week, and it was Aspires, and we were like probably a minute and a half or so off. You can really, when you're doing keys that high, you can really pick out, these are the moments where we lost time. This is
you just
the
feel
thing.
it. Know, it's like, okay, well, this pull is why we're not making the timer.
Exactly, right. And so it's interesting when you're getting into that and you start doing like, okay, well, you know what, since we're probably not going to make the timer, let's do a little bit more of a crazy thing here to see if we pull it off, we might actually be closer to making it, kind of thing, right?
That risk reward
thing. When you start doing the risk reward thing and it gets a little out of control, and that was a good time though. We had fun doing it. But yeah, that was what I sort of dug into Keystone wise. We did a Mythic sale this past week, so that went okay. We the team was in on Tuesday night, and they were up to Fate Scribe, and then they just had the Fate Scribe thing where they got hung up there for like an hour and a half, and it was like, okay, I guess we'll still. I mean, they stayed till they killed it, which was great. It didn't go over raid time, which was good, but it took till the end of raid time, and so then we still had KT and Sylv left. So I was in for KT and Sylv on Wednesday, and we knocked those out fairly. I think we had 1 wipe on Sylv, so it was fairly smooth.
Oh, nice.
So that was nice. It's still good for us, like a 2-night clear for me. I'm still happy for the week. I mean, 1-night clear is glorious, but a 2-night clear still feels good for the week. I am excited for a new raid tier to come out just to see how quickly we move through it as a team, because you never really know until you've done a prog tier with a team what to sort of expect. But there was a lot of raid testing last Friday, and a bunch of people were in doing that and having fun doing that. I was sort of watching from the sidelines as I was working. But it was neat to see some of the bosses and have people get a little bit more excited and a little bit more pumped up for the new raid coming out. I imagine we'll see more raid testing over the next few weeks, which I think will be great before they move into their holiday break. And so by they, I mean Blizzard moves into their holiday break because they end up taking the week off around Christmas and New Year's, and they come back afterwards. So it's very similar to like what schools and universities do, is they take that week off, same sort of week off for everybody in that period of time and shut down. So I imagine we'll see probably one more raid test thing happen, and then we'll see a closeout at Blizz, and then they'll reopen in January, and we'll get a better idea of where they're at timeline-wise. I imagine mid-January when it comes to PTR launching, which is probably going to be end of February, I still think, is where my guess is for this next raid stuff.
Yeah, I think you're probably somewhere in the neighborhood there for sure. Yeah, I think we'll probably see like, maybe 1 or 2. They usually do raid testing on like Fridays, right? So
yeah,
we'll probably see 1 more round, if not 2 more, but definitely I would say no more than that before the end of the year. And then, yeah, I think PTR. I guess we should mention that PTR servers are officially live now. PTR was not actually up yet when we talked last, but we knew it was imminent. And then I think I think PTR notes went up literally the day after we recorded last week.
Yep, it went up Wednesday. Yeah,
the servers were a little bit behind. Servers were not up Wednesday, but they are up now. So you can log into 9.2 PTR if you haven't. You can copy your character over and check it out. You can make a template character and check it out. And we'll talk about what's in the current build some more, but yeah, that meant that raid testing has commenced, and we are still probably 3-ish months off. I'm thinking about March we'll probably see the patch actually land, and then obviously 2 weeks after that for the full season to really kick in.
Yeah.
But that lines up with about, their PTRs are typically about 3 months for this kind of stuff, and that is kind of far away, but it does start to really feel like it's real once they start doing raid testing.
Yeah. No, I'll mention one funny thing. Last week, we predicted that at least I predicted that we'd see, I don't know if you were in agreement or not, but we'd see PTR on Thursday. And what ended up happening was they and now they dropped the notes and announced PTR was going live on Wednesday. And then the servers went up and immediately crashed, and they didn't get them back up again until Thursday. So we were technically right because PTR was not up until Thursday.
Yeah, so we'll claim victory on the technicality there. They tried to do it on Wednesday.
They tried to beat it. No.
The TSZ prediction was working against them.
Apparently. But otherwise, outside of that last week, I did my usual cycle where I let 3 emissaries build up, swap over to Kyrian, do my Kyrian stuff, swap back over to Venthyr. I will have 80 this week for Kyrian when I log in tonight to do my 3 emissaries, and that'll finish that off, and then I won't have to worry about doing any renown stuff for that, but still tons and tons of anima to collect and to spend. It's pretty ridiculous out there, so there's lots and lots to do still.
Nice. Yeah. See, I'm not doing any of that stuff right now, but I'm not lamenting it.
No,
it is cool. I feel like I don't have to do it, so it's cool. Like if you want to do it, I can definitely see there being a cool thing about like having the flexibility to swap covenants and you're not really losing anything. You're just making different choices. Like that is awesome. It's valuable. In fact, one of the dudes that I do dungeons with, I think he's got at least 3 covenants maxed out on his Demon Hunter. So he can swap around depending on what dungeon we need or what covenant coverage we need. It's a really nice luxury to have. It's just not what I kind of want to do with my character. So, it definitely it's cool because it pays dividends for your group, even if you're not the one doing it.
Yeah. We'll mention one other thing about PTR with the raid testing, since I mentioned that. The tier sets are out that are on PTR. You can go and buy them in town. That is something you can do if you want to play around with them. The second legendary is not out yet. The quest chain that allows you to put on a second legendary, that has not gone live in the PTR yet. So you get up to a certain point and then it just stops you from being able to progress farther. So all the testing that was going on was with one legendary with tier sets on. And so it was interesting to see where some classes were starting to shape out there Because as a boomkin, I'm kind of curious still as to what covenants, and you talked about swapping covenants, I'm going to end up in. And it was funny to see one person playing Night Fae and one person playing Venthyr, and they're actually doing comparable damage to each other, like very much so. And you're like, okay, how's the second legendary thing going to tweak this? And how much is it going to tweak this? And what's going to happen with it? And so there's still a lot of big questions floating around about where we're going to end up. But I'm excited to see how things start to play out. Anyways, let's jump into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. All right, as we've mentioned a few times now, Legion Timewalking is this week. That's the weekly event. It feels weird to say that because it feels like Timewalking shouldn't be a weekly event. It should be something that, well, it should be a weekly event. It just should be one of 2 weekly events. We should always have a Timewalking week. I'm going to keep saying it every time.
Keep pounding the drum.
There should always be a Timewalking every single week. It should be off of the rotation from weekly events.
It's one of the best features. It's one of the things that really introduces so much longevity into this game, and it's very accessible to all players, pretty much. I mean, I don't think that having to get to level 50 is a huge barrier to prevent you from participating in Timewalking these days. So you may disagree. That's fine, but I feel like Timewalking is a very accessible event, as these things go, and just being able to reuse and repurpose existing content is a really great thing for a game that has so much content that we move on from so fast. So weekly, a rotating weekly Timewalking thing like they do with Brawls would be perfect.
It would be. But Legion Timewalking means that the sign of the Legion is up, where Legion reputation gains from combat and quests is increased by 50%. And as Jason mentioned, level 50 characters can participate in Timewalking versions of Blackrock Hold, Court of Stars, Darkheart Thicket, Eye of Ashara, Neltharian's Lair, and Vault of the Wardens. These dungeons drop 184 eye level loot, and the Timewalking vendor sells 178 eye level. There is obviously the new toy and mount and cosmetic stuff on the vendor in Legion Dalaran. So if you go to the Legion version of Dalaran, you can get yourself the toy and mount and cosmetics off of the vendor there. So make sure you have your Time-worn badges, hopefully from the anniversary event you've been saving up to buy yourself some mounts and stuff.
There's so much cool stuff and it's so expensive.
Yeah.
But I want to point out here that there are some really cool, unique cosmetics on the vendor, because Legion had some really cool looks, right? I think. I mean, it's my favorite expansion that had some of my favorite aesthetics. One of the things it has is a cosmetic Aegis of Agrimar. If you remember that, what that looked like, right? Which it was one of the artifacts you had to collect for Khadgard as part of the story questing, and then tanks had to use it in the Cathedral of Eternal Night dungeon, right? Like you had to carry it around, and it was a thing you had to interact with. It's now a cosmetic appearance that you can purchase from the Legion Timewalking vendor, and it looks great. And you can also get a cosmetic set of armor that makes you look like one of the Blackrock Hold soldiers, right? Like the what's like Kurtalos, Ravencrest's foot soldier guys.
One of those. So cool.
Yeah, really cool looking armor. And the other thing too is there's a whole slate of stuff to hold in your hands, weapons and shields and offhands and stuff that are Legion themed. They look, a lot of them look really kind of like Highborn themed, like Nightborn as we have the playable race now.
But Jason, they have that kind of vibe. There weren't weapons in Legion. We just had our artifacts.
Right. There were no weapon drops, so you never got any other appearances other than your artifact. But now this stuff it syncs up pretty nice. Like if you want to do kind of like a Suramar looking, vibe on your character, or especially if you're playing like a Nightborn, this stuff really fits that kind of fantasy really well. So definitely going to be worth a look at the new Timewalking vendor, which you can find in Legion Dalaran once this event is live in your region.
Yeah. So definitely check that out. All right. As far as Mythic Keystones go for Legion, there is a NPC called Tashup or Tasup in the Great Vault area, where you receive a keystone. There'll be one rank lower than your current Shadowlands keystone. So if you have a current Shadowlands keystone, you talk to Tassup, they'll give you a Legion keystone that you can use. And basically you take this keystone out, same way as you would doing keystones in modern WoW, and go back to Legion, and you socket it in and jump into your keystone. And it will be a scaled version, so a scaled up version of that dungeon. You don't put on old gear. You don't do anything like that. It is you wear what you currently would wear to a Mythic Plus dungeon. There's no like, hey, equip your weapon, or hey, equip your legendaries, or like none of that works. It's just a current dungeon is what they've basically turned these into. So be aware of that. And you will get credit for completing your M plus towards your weekly vault, but the Legion rewards don't show up as choices. So basically, when you finish the dungeon, it will go, hey, you complete a 15 for this week if you did a 15 Legion, right? So you'll get a chance of getting a level 15 gear, so that 252 gear out of your vault. However, it won't be Legion gear. You're not going to get some crazy broken trinket from Legion or whatever it is from your Great Vault. It's still just the current gear population.
Right. Yeah. It's the Shadowlands dungeon loot pool. You could do 10 Legion Keystone dungeons this week or next week, and you'll get 3 choices from your vault at reset, but it will be all choices from Shadowlands dungeons, which is understandable, I guess. I think that for one thing, it would make the pool way too large on the weeks when it was active, and it would be really difficult to get a particular thing. Plus, like, we'll see how this shakes out as people start getting Legion gear up to item level 246. If there are particular pieces or combos that are like way overpowered, then the pressure to, have that appear at 252 at a total random chance 1 or 2 weeks every, is 4 or 5 months or whatever, it would just make people feel really bad. So I think it's probably the correct call. I do suspect we're going to see some loot that's probably better than Shadowlands loot that might have to get changed or something, just because whenever they introduce this much like scaled up gear into a system, there tend to be problems like that. I mean, I remember even at like the beginning of my beloved Legion, tank trinkets were so bad that actually like one of the best trinkets you could have was from Wrath of the Lich King Timewalking vendor.
Yeah,
like, you bought the vendor
that
trinket and you used it until like 7-2 or something, because it was just that much more mitigation
so
than
much
anything
armor.
else.
It was some insane amount of armor.
It was like, I believe it was an on use, armor proc, and it was extremely valuable. Well, I guess it's not a proc if it's an on use, but I expect that something like that will emerge over the next 2 weeks as this loot starts circulating among the player base. So it'll be funny to track that, and then it'll be sad when they nerf it or bring it in line with the other thing. There's probably some ring that's like way out of whack, and the haste scales up way too much, and it's like the best ring you can possibly get if on a certain stat. And I think they probably want to avoid that. You want the flavor of the Legion gear, but you want it to be comparable to what you're getting from current content, I think.
Yeah. There is actually an affix, a special seasonal affix, if you will, for the Legion dungeon. So not only are you dealing with the normal affixes that we have, obviously you're now also dealing with Infernal, which is the affix that's currently up for Timewalking. I don't know if they ever plan on changing these, but basically there are these Infernal beacons that are located near bosses. And if you activate a beacon, or if you engage a boss who's near a beacon, it will trigger it. And it brings in a Legion invasion. Basically, a portal opens up and the Legion invade into the dungeon, and you have to fight them off. So keep in mind that if you're just sort of like, yeah, let's do it, let's pull this boss, let's go, and you haven't activated a beacon, you might be fighting the boss plus a whole bunch of Legion mobs that are spawning in. So might want to actually deal with that first.
Depending on what dungeon you're doing, it might be hard to tell the difference. Like, hey, this is just what happens in here. But we haven't, obviously, like, this is not live in North America yet. We haven't had a chance to check this out. I honestly don't know if I'm going to do these this week, because I just have different priorities. Like, as we kind of were just discussing, right? My priorities are trying to get plus 20s timed and try to unlock some teleports and working on my current, Mythic Plus rating. So as fun as this is, I think like this is not where my headspace resides. And this is not where like I value my game time to go. I love some of these dungeons, though, like a lot. Like Nelth's Lair, I think, is just one of the coolest dungeons they've ever made. Vault of the Wardens, thematically, the atmosphere in there is so great. Some layout issues with Blackrock Hold, but like I love it conceptually. I mean, it's such an important part of the history of WoW, of Warcraft's story. And I think like they did a great job bringing it to life in the dungeon. It's just like, they designed the dungeon before they came up with Sanguine, for example. So, there are some parts that kind of, they rub up against each other, but I love the theming of that. And something like Court of Stars was so unique and had so many cool different little angles that you could explore depending on what classes and professions you brought to it. Like some ideas we haven't unfortunately seen repeated since then. So, I'm super happy to see this content come back to life, come back to some degree of relevance. And, I know a lot of people who didn't play Legion, which is really sad. Every time somebody tells me that, I just get sad. Like, yeah, I didn't really like Warlord, so I checked out for a while. But I came back for BFA, and I'm like, oh, man, I'm sorry to hear that. Timewalking cannot replace, Legion when it was current, but, like, it's at least cool. It's cool that they're bringing back so much of the flavor of Legion, right? Like, yes, we have the dungeons, okay, but we have the Keystone thing. I think the Keystone thing, it was introduced during Legion. It adds a whole different layer to the event. Plus, another thing to keep in mind here, which you mentioned, but like we don't usually talk too much about this, like Sign of the Legion, 50% rep gains, right? You have emissary bags. You have emissary bags in Legion, right? Like that's where they brought in the concept of, hey, after you hit Exalted with this rep, keep repping up, and you'll have a chance to get something really cool. So, if you're shooting for a reward from an emissary bag from Legion, like you got 2 weeks to hit up world quests and daily, the emissary bonuses and all that. And you could pound out a whole bunch of those bags in this initial 2 week run. So
yeah,
that's also another cool thing.
Yeah. And the last part of this is you want to be sure you go out and you pick up your quests inside Oribos for completing 5 of these actual dungeons. So they can be M+ versions of Legion dungeons or just normal versions of Legion dungeons, which will get you a cache of Sanctum gear is what you end up getting, normal Sanctum of Domination gear. So be sure you pick that up if you're planning on jumping into any of the Legion dungeons this week. Okay, Mage Tower. Mage Tower is the other key feature of this time walking that's going on. Basically, you head to Deliverer's Point on Broken Shore, and once you're there, you can actually talk to Khadgar, who will queue you into the Mage Tower, and it'll be for the spec that you're currently in. And so you basically queue in, and you go into one of 7 unique challenges, depending on what your spec and class is. So these are all sort of broken up, where like they have, Blood Death Knight and Vengeance Demon Hunter and Guardian Druid and Brewmaster and Protection Warrior and Protection Paladin, all inside the tanking one, which is High Lord Cruel. They all fight High Lord Cruel, and that's sort of their class-specific, spec-specific, role-specific one they play on. And then there's the healing one, which is the End of the Risen Threat, which you get to go and do, which is the one that I found really challenging the first week I was going into it. There's a lot of, hey, guess what? Your role as a healer is also to deal a lot of damage. And if you can manage to keep everyone alive while doing a bunch of damage, you'll make it through this challenge. Because there's a lot of like, I don't know what's going to be like now, a lot of like soft breakpoints where stuff just gets so out of control healing wise that if you haven't defeated the boss by that point, you're not going to be successful in defeating the boss. So that was an interesting challenge to sort of go up against. They did the Thwarting the Twins, which was the one for balanced druids, where you had to run around and dot up a whole bunch of stuff. And basically one twin is evil and one twin is good, trying to stop the evil twin. And basically the evil one slowly walks towards you across the platform where all these imps and everything are spawning in. That one was a little crazy. That's like the dot specific one. You had Affliction Warlock, Balanced Druid, Shadow Priest, and then they also threw in Marksman Hunter and Frost Mage because they had to fit more in for Marksman Hunter and Frost Mage. Yeah, man. And then I also really remember the Closing the Eye one, which was the one for Frost Death Knights, Havoc Demon Hunters, Survival Hunters, Subtlety Rogues, and Arms Warriors, where you're in the Eye. You're in the Nexus, the Eye instance, and you are dealing with this mage character who's sort of teleporting around doing a lot of stuff. And I was doing it on my Subtlety Rogue, or my Rogue, who was spec Subtlety for this, and I had no idea how to play Subtlety. And I had to learn how to play the class. Like, I actually had to learn how to play Subtlety well in order to beat this. Because I had such low gear by the time I got around to doing my Subtlety Rogue. I hadn't geared him up at all. And so I had to like actually do a really close to perfect run. to make it happen. And that was really interesting to me to have these sorts of challenges inspire me doing that. I still will say the easiest of these challenges, in my opinion, is the Impossible Foe, which I think is hilarious because of the name, but it's Agatha, where she spawns inside one big pool and starts summoning imps towards you, and you have to defeat the imps and then defeat her on one side, and then she teleports to the other side and sends imps at you from the other side. This was the Outlaw Rogue, Elemental Shaman, Fury Warrior, Feral Druid, and a Holy DK one, as well as Fire Mages were thrown in there. Man, as Feral Druid, this was like cake, because it's all AoE based, so if you can do AoE damage, it was like, pound the imps down, you're on Agatha. Pound the imps down, you're on Agatha, she's dead. Done. You're like, wow.
Right,
okay.
and you had to move a bunch, but like it was mostly very mobile classes.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, Unholy DKs, but it was mostly mobile classes that had to do it.
Yeah. So I'm digging this. I want to dig into this, and obviously what we'll have a week where I hopefully get to do 1 or 2 of these. I work a ton this week. I work Tuesday to Saturday, so it's going to be a little uncomfortable to try and fit in too much Mage Tower when I can this week. However, next week it's looking like I'll have a lot more time, but I'll at least talk about the ones on next week's show that I've done and checked out. And I'll try and stream some of the ones that I'm doing, because I think it'll be a lot of fun for people to check them out and watch. But then next week that'll be the let's make sure I get everything done week that I can. And again, reminder, this is level 50 and up. Like, I don't think you had to be max level to go do this Mage Tower. Like, this is part of the time walking event. So
I mean, I haven't tested it and I can't do it on live, but like, there's nothing that indicates that you need to be max level, and it's normalized. Like, it's not, your character is scaled to this, so it's not like you need to get to some item level breakpoint where it becomes easier. Like, it's not, it's time walking, right? Yeah. It's not current content.
So I might break out that rogue who I haven't touched since I did this Mage Tower stuff on, and try and do it on my rogue again to get the new rewards. Because just a reminder, all the rewards for the Mage Tower this time around aren't the old ones, they're new ones. So not only is there amount that you can get for completing all 7 of the challenges, there's also obviously a feats of strength for each of the actual spec specific ones that you can do, and then there's cosmetic rewards. There's all the recolors of the tier 20 sets for your class that are out there. There's the new transformation coloration for druids, for guardian one, if you want to try and get the fell sort of large bear version, you can get that. So they're worth doing. They're worth checking out. I'm excited for doing it. I think Mage Tower is going to be a very cool thing to dive into, and maybe we'll throw some questions to people about Mage Tower and what they think in this month's Patreon stuff. Who knows?
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what reaction to this is like. When this was live, it was very challenging when it came out, and it became gradually less challenging up to the point of being, in my opinion, most of these were gimmies by the end of Legion.
Yeah, by the very end of it. Yeah.
As long as you had the shards or whatever they were called to buy the entrance, you had to pay to enter each time.
And
as long as you could afford to do that.
If you could do that, and if you could send your character gear from the vendor level, like tradable gear that was from Deliverance Point, if you had that was for me. It was, I had to unlock my artifact weapon, and then I mailed a bunch of that gear to my character, and then I was able to basically go out and just do whatever one I wanted to do on that character. It obviously was much easier with gear. If you were someone who only played one character, by the end of the expansion, it was a cakewalk as far as the gearing went for it.
Yeah, and as you know, once we had the exploding concordance, where concordance was just constantly ranking up and all that, it was more just are you dedicated enough? Okay, maybe you don't know how to play this class or this spec, but do you want to try to get this reward? You can go figure out how to do it. So it was kind of a roller coaster throughout the lifespan of Legion, right? Because at first it was this huge bar that was very intimidating to people, and then people started getting over the bar, and it became a bit aspirational, but it was still pretty hard. And then I think a lot of people gave up earlier than maybe was necessary because it got really easy at the end, right?
Yeah.
I'm expecting this to be pretty accessible. It's time walking. They're scaling our characters. This should not be a thing that you are pounding your head into your desk over for, the next 14 straight days trying to get your reward of choice.
Yeah.
Right? If you have a spec that you're comfortable playing, this should be approachable. We'll see if that's what they think, and if we hit that, from the verbiage, the way the posts about it are worded, I kind of suspect that that's how it's going to be. And I think that's the way it should be. It's time walking. It should be a celebration. It should be accessible. It should be fun. The rewards are okay. Tier 20 is
a great tier. It's all tier 6, right? It's up resed up. It's higher poly count tier 6, which was Black Temple. This stuff originally dropped in Tomb of Sargeras. Very iconic class looks. These are looks for most classes that you look at it and go, oh yeah, that's a WoW paladin. That's a WoW priest. That's a WoW warrior. Like, they're just unmistakable. These sets are kind of responsible for setting the identities of these classes to a large degree, right? In my opinion, anyway. The recolors, I think, are varying degrees of successful. Some of them look cool. Some of them look really cool and look like a very good reason to go out and try to get it. And some of them look just way worse than everything else you can already get from drops or from vendors, because you can buy these with Marks of Honor too, the PvP recolors, right? So it's interesting. I mean, I think the unique werebear is a very cool option. As somebody who has a couple tints of the original werebear, it's like, I would like another one. If you missed out entirely, like, you still get that cool silhouette. Everybody will know where it came from, but it's also kind of the new hotness. Like, nobody has the Fell werebear yet. So I think that's kind of a cool way to do it. It doesn't detract from the specialness of the people who got it at the time, but it also gives people another opportunity to get that silhouette and that cool transformation. So that's pretty neat. The mount is actually pretty cool. Like, especially if you're like a magic user caster type character, I think it's great flavor, and it's sort of a cool incentive to try each one of the 7 challenges. Doing all 36 specs to get the feat of strength is like way over the top. Like, that's a pretty cool thing to do. I almost feel like a feat of strength isn't enough, but I get why they don't want to like really actually influence you to try to do it, right? Like, they're not dangling the mount. They're not dangling some type of really obvious thing for your character. They're dangling a feat of strength, which means if you're somebody who wants to go out there and put the time in and do this on all 36 specs that exist in the game across all 12 classes, then you do have something to show for it. You can click it out of your UI. You can link it to somebody. You can post it on Twitter, right? Like, it's there. Yeah. But it's not like, hey, here's a thing that like 85% of the player base is going to want. Let's put it behind this barrier that's like borderline impossible for most people to overcome. So I think it's cool that there's some support for it in there, but it's the kind of thing that's just straight up bragging rights.
Yeah, I would have liked if this feat of strength was, I guess, a continual from the original Legion Mage Towers. So if you'd done the original Legion Mage Towers on certain characters and classes, they counted towards this feat of strength. That would have been kind of cool. Yeah. So for those people who were like, I did 24 of them, you could actually be like, all right, I do 12, and then I can get the feat of strength, and then there'd be some sort of little like nudge of appreciation towards the people who were there originally, and get some sort of reward for it. That would be kind of cool. As far as the book mount goes, I think that's wicked. I'm looking forward to seeing a whole bunch of them in raid. People riding around on books is going to be a wicked thing to see. So I like that mount. That mount is very cool. And yeah, we've already talked about the tier 20 stuff, so that's cool. All right, this week, world bosses. We got Bone Construct in Maldraxxus. His big old Mortanis is back up. You can get yourself some 200 eye level Covenant ability conduits, as well as some 207 eye level gear. And which memories is this melee boss dropping for us?
So if you like punching or stabbing or slashing stuff, then Mortanis has you covered. You get Guile Charm for rogues, Fujita for warriors, and Kiefer for monks. So if you need to fill out those power UI panels, make sure you go out there and handle Mortanis this week.
Yeah, and then you also have Morgeth, the Tormentor of the Damned in Desmateron, so be sure you head out there to get your 200 eye level ability conduits for Adaptive Armor Fragment and Condensed Animosphere, as well as your Shard of Rev, and some 233 eye level gear, including a Mastery Trinket with a main stat proc. So check that out. Mythic Plus affixes for the week are Tyrannical, Bolstering, and Explosive. This means that boss enemies have 30% more health and inflict 15% increased damage. When slain, any non-boss enemy's Deathcry empowers its nearby allies, increasing their maximum health by 15% and damage by 20%. And while in combat, enemies periodically summon explosive orbs that will detonate if not destroyed. I mean, this is a great week in the sense that Tyrannical, Bolstering, Explosive don't really affect each other that much. When it comes to Tyrannical, Bosses are going to be more difficult. There's going to be particular bosses that have adds who summon explosives. So there's going to be some boss fights where like you're going to have to deal with some explosive orbs throughout the boss fight, because it's not just the boss summoning them, but some of their adds summon them too. So that is going to be something you want to pay a little bit of attention to. But explosive orbs have so little health that like a moonfire or like a white hit melee attack will kill an orb. So just like a little bit of focus from your team who's in there, a little bit of focus from your healer, even if your healer's just throwing damage into them. It's great to just clean up the orbs and get rid of them. It does mean with bolstering explosive that they actually are telling you very clearly, don't pull a ton of mobs at the same time, because explosives spawn based off the amount of mobs you have, and bolstering will bolster allies obviously when one dies, which means any pack you pull, you need to be able to kill around the same time, because it's going to bolster everything around it, which means if you kill one mob in a pack of 5 mobs, you essentially just increased every other mob's theirs health by, like 50% or 75%, and their damage by another, 80% as far as the damage and health you actually have to chew through. Like, that's crazy.
You created, if you kill a mob on top of 5 other mobs, you just created an extra mob.
Yeah.
Like, essentially. I mean, this is why you want to, try to time out those individual deaths.
Yeah. So it's sort of just being that clarity of, okay, if I'm going to pull a pack of 5 mobs, I need to kill all 5 at the same time, which means as I'm killing all 5 at the same time, we're going to be dealing with 5 explosive orbs throughout that entire duration, because each mob spawns an explosive orb, which means if you're going to do a ginormous pull, you have to actually be able to line of sight all of the explosive orbs, because there's no way you're going to be able to get all of them. What I sort of picture is the first pull in Halls of Atonement, where everyone sort of goes in and they pull like that entire front area and then like 2 side packs together and AoE it all down with heroism up. That's like a very common pull that I see people do inside Halls of Atonement. That is very dangerous. There is 0 place to line of sight those orbs there. That's easy to get to. You go downstairs or something like that, but then you're running towards more mobs and potentially pulling even more mobs. And to actually even just start gathering all those mobs together, you are dealing with explosive orbs as the mobs are coming together, because they're going to start spawning right away. So it's just being aware of what the week is and going, hey, you know what? It's explosive bolstering week. We should not do ginormous pulls. We should do controlled pulls. That'll get us through the dungeon. It's not fortified. Stuff's going to die very quickly. So that's going to work towards your favor as far as getting through a dungeon quickly. Just being sure you have cooldowns and stuff up for bosses for Tyrannical.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is the good thing this week, is that you don't have to pull huge to get through the trash with time to spare. You want to maintain a good pace, but you don't have to do, massive pulls in order to get through that hallway up to the boss with enough time left, because you don't have to deal with fortified. So that is a plus. Explosive can be really bad with certain bosses, which are already going to be bad with Tyrannical. So, it's just, you have to designate. I think what usually works for our group is like, okay, we just say somebody is going to be on explosive duty for a boss fight or whatever. So everybody knows that they're going to swap over and handle it. And then everybody else can focus on, we have to kick this or have to CC that or whatever. Specifically, second boss of Mists of Tyrannosaith is the one that always makes me cringe with Tyrannical Explosive Week, because you can have like 6 explosives up at once when you have like guessing game with the boss plus the ad running around. That can get a little out of hand.
Especially if someone's attempting to kill explosives and they actually break the CC that's on the wolves and the fox runs into something. And yeah. And
then your tank throws a Stormbolt at it as it's being re-CC'd. So the minimal damage from the Stormbolt breaks the CC, but then stuns it for 2 seconds. Not that I've ever done that, but,
I'm helping.
The good thing is that bolstering really has very minimal impact with Tyrannical. You could make it, I guess, if you want to, but you don't do that. Tyrannical, is tough though. As we always say, like Tyrannical on its own can be a showstopper of an affix as you get to your group's ceiling. But overall, I like this week. I hope we have some time to get in there and get some keys, and I hope the Keystone lottery, pays out this week, and that we get some dungeons that we want to look at and might actually have a shot at timing, because this is a good combo. Trash is going to die. There's no, I don't know. Even if you bolster some non-fortified trash to some degree. It's not game over.
Nearly as bad. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, as long as you don't 100% ignore explosives, I think this is a great week. If you're pushing for KSM, if you're just trying to, beat your own personal best or whatever, you're going to need tyrannical points from somewhere. And I think this is one of the better tyrannical combos that we see.
Yeah, I just, again, remember like the first boss of Plaguefall with all the oozes out front. You pull all those oozes, you're dead because you're going to spawn so many volcanics, you can't deal with it, right? So
every single ooze is not dangerous.
Yeah.
And theoretically, like you could pull all, you could do that in 2 pulls.
Yeah.
Or even 1 pull if you want to go, you want to go big, but like between bolster and explosive, forget it.
Exactly.
One slime's going to be a little bit too far back to hit that AoE, and it's going to get gigantic, and you're going to waste all the time that you thought you were saving. And, you're definitely going to get overwhelmed with explosives if you pull more than like 5-6 mobs at any time, for a prolonged period of time. I think most of the dungeons that we have don't really require those size pulls this season from the way I'm feeling.
They help. Those size pulls help for sure.
Like maybe like Mist of Tyrannosaith, like the run to the 3rd boss, right? With the slugs. I don't know what to call them. Yeah. But sometimes, you pretty much double that whole hallway, right? And like some of those packs are already 5 mobs, 6 mobs. You might get like 2 5 pulls plus a 2 pat. So, that can get, the numbers can get up there on something like that. But if you can make up the time elsewhere in the dungeon, you might be able to do that a bit surgically, just double up a couple smaller pulls, and then you can do that a bit more safely this week. Cause I think you'll be able to slice through the trash if you have a good plan.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. PvP Brawl this week is Temple of Hot Magoo. It's one of my favorite ones. This is one of the ones I love to dive into. Basically, it's Temple of Hot Magoo in a very fast-paced twist where people only have 5 seconds to respawn. So basically, once you die, it just takes 5 seconds for you to pop back up, which is great. And you basically are able to throw the orbs of power that are up to other players. So if you get up to 10 stacks of it, you can then throw it to a friend if you're someone who's getting into trouble, and that friend can grab it, and you can have them upstairs in the arena and you're downstairs in the pit, and you throw it up out of the arena, and then people have to try and chase down this other person who's up there. And it's cool. It's a lot of fun. I just like the pace of it. It's just very fast paced. You gain those stacks quickly. The stacks make people take more damage, so you see really big numbers. And it's a lot of fun. I enjoy this.
Yeah, the fast pace is what I really like about this one in particular. One of my least favorite parts of PvP is being dead. I'm not very good at PvP, so I'm dead frequently. So the fast respawn timer is nice. It's also kind of funny to just build up that debuff stack and then pass it off to somebody. But yeah, this is one of those ones where it's like, I wouldn't mind too much if this is just the way Temple of Hot Magoo worked. Sometimes we have brawls where it's like, I don't like this modification at all, and I would not like to play this. Sometimes it's like, this is better than the actual thing, and the actual thing should just be this.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, this is wacky, but it's a good kind of wacky, so it's some nice variety. This is one of the ones where I think if this just was Temple, maybe from like a high level competitive standpoint, it might be worse, but I don't know, for an everyday player perspective, I think this is just more fun than Temple of Hot Magoo, honestly.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. All right, as far as the micro holiday goes, we got Wanderers Festival, which is up tomorrow. So be sure that when you listen to this episode, which is going to go up tonight, you are aware that Wanderers Festival starts at Reset on Tuesday. So this is the celebration of and to honor Louis Lang Shenzin Su at Turtle Beach in Karazong Wilds, and it's time to basically contemplation and songs. You head down to the beach in Krasarang. Well, I always say Karazang. I don't know why, but that's how my brain. Even during Pandaria, it was Karazang Wilds to me, but it's Krasarang Wilds. And you head down to the beach, and you get to sit around a fire circle and meditate and contemplate with people, and it's a lot of fun. It's a cool one.
I've never actually done this.
Cool.
I might have to check it out tomorrow. And I think there is actually an achievement that you get for doing it. I was reading some Wowhead comments about this because I was trying to contextualize this to myself. I was like, when did this get put in the game? I don't ever remember doing this, and what happens? So I was doing a little bit of research, and it seems as though this might actually be like a very brief but weekly event in the game. Like there's a thing with Lu Lang like every week, and you have to go to Krasrang Wilds and talk to an NPC down there to find out when it is, and then it only lasts for like it runs one night twice for 20 minutes each, and then it repeats the following week or something. This is what I was gathering from the comments, and I'm not sure that this is still how it works, but like I had never heard of this at all, but I guess during the micro holiday the event runs the entire day.
Yeah.
So I love Krasrang Wilds. It was such a cool zone, and it was it was utilized so well in 5.1, which I think was a great example of how to do a patch that's like very story and outdoor world gameplay focused without, including a bunch of raid content and stuff. But they kind of don't have that model anymore. I don't think they would do a patch similar to 5.1 again anytime soon, but it was a really cool moment in the game's history. And it was, Krasrang Wilds was the kind of the focal point, right? That was the space that we were occupying the whole time. And
that was where the battles were happening. Yeah.
Yep. I haven't really been back there since. So, I don't know that I'm going to check this out, but I might have to just go see what it's all about, because I don't know. Somehow this completely got by me. I've never done this.
No. Well, you should certainly check it out. And there's Darkmoon Fair is also continuing all through this week. It's up till the 11th of December. So be sure you're taking advantage of the extra reputation buff and experience buff, and you're getting your pet battle charms, and you're buying your cosmetics you want, and you're doing the arcade stuff, and you're doing the races, and you're getting your achievements and all the fun stuff that revolve around Darkmoon Fair. So we'll see if there's something there for me to pick up and do. I tend to go down there and do the pet battles to get the Darkmoon tokens to make sure I have a nice stockpile for when inevitably the next really expensive mount or pet or whatever it is drops. We know that there's updates coming in 9.2.5 for am I crazy now? No, I'm not crazy. It's 9.2.5. I'm not crazy. Am I crazy?
You lost me.
I lost you? No.
I mean, the next patch is 9.2.
9.2, yeah. There's no 9.2.5 yet.
No, yeah.
I don't know why my brain did that, but it did that, and it was.
You're just ready to go all the way.
More content. I am.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked
if we. I want a .5 at the end patch. I just want it. That's where
I wouldn't
my
be
brain
shocked
is now.
if we get a 9.2.5 to kind of maybe type some loose ends, add some final kind of quality of life tweaks. But right now we're looking for 9.2, which will, that's when we'll see some new Darkmoon Fair stuff. They didn't mention. I don't think. I mean, we're going to talk about it in just a minute here, but I don't think the new Darkmoon Fair stuff is testable yet. I do not think it's in the build that's on PTR.
I don't think it is either, but yes, we're looking forward to exploring and having fun with all the new things coming in Darkmoon Fair. As far as PTR news goes, the development notes for the PTR have been updated. A bunch of new stuff came in. As we talked about, raid testing happened this past week. They have now started updating some of the tier set bonuses for a lot of classes. So if you were someone who initially looked at tier set bonuses, take a look again, because they've slowly been working their way through different classes, particularly a lot of the healing classes, and going, all right, new bonuses coming in. This is just placeholder. Another thing they updated was the tier set for helm for warlocks is getting updated. Its model right now is just one of those unidentifiable cubes. So if you put that helmet on in game, it's hilarious. People are just running around with cubes on their heads, which is totally funny to see. So yeah, that's a thing. A PTR is PTR. It's silly and will remain silly, and that's all there is to it.
It's very malleable. They can bend stuff to their will on PTR.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like they've been really willing to listen to community feedback about the set bonus designs, and that they've been, we've already seen some discussion about particular bonuses that are not, super appealing on their face. And, we've seen blue text to indicate that they're actively looking at those and willing to make changes and, rework them as necessary. So I think that's really cool. I mean, I think that most of us probably want the same thing out of tier bonuses, which is some way to shake up your gameplay, to make your pushing particular buttons feel more interesting or different or better for some period of time. And I think that should be the design goal for the bonuses. You want to highlight a particular ability, a particular part of a class or spec kit. You want to highlight a particular synergy between, two abilities that play off of each other, or you want to highlight a particular proc. You want to introduce some kind of a proc that then prompts some other type of gameplay. Like, I think these are things that historically have created successful set bonuses. I think having like passive buffs to stuff that you want to do anyway is less exciting. We want tier bonuses to mean we're doing something different. We're building and speccing our character in a way to take advantage of those bonuses because they're changing up our style and our priority. So yeah, that, you know, they've paid some lip service to wanting to do that and to wanting to move towards that. And they've said that, you know, there are bonuses that they sort of agree are not, you know, hitting that level or not meeting those goals. So we'll keep an eye on it, and it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. You know, I feel like obviously this is a very small sample size, and we have kind of a long history of them not doing stuff like this, but they've stated their intent that they want to do stuff like this. And at least so far, they're holding up their end of the bargain, you know, a few days into PTR.
Yeah.
So we'll see where it goes. I'm not saying everybody is going to be super happy with their tier set bonus. That's not even possible. That's not a possible thing that can happen. But I do think if they can address pain points or just like stuff that doesn't hit right, stuff that's not exciting on PTR, like if you could spruce that up a little bit, then I think that pays big dividends over the, you know, probably, I don't know, conservatively 8 or 9 months that the patch is going to live, maybe longer than that. Like, you got some time here and you got a captive audience. Like, the people that are on your PTR are really invested in your game at this point, right?
Yeah.
They really want to help you improve it into something that they and the people that they play with and other people want to play. So yeah, listen to them. And I'm not saying let them into the tools and design the game for you, but you know, it's just cool to see. It's cool to see because I feel like it's just not what we've had over the past 17 years.
Yeah, no. I mean, tier set bonuses are really cool, Jason, but I want to talk about the thing that I really want to highlight here, which is a new cooking recipe. No, it's a new cooking recipe. It's called Empty Kettle of Stone Soup, and it's essentially a potluck. You basically set out a kettle of stone soup that's ready to be filled with delicious ingredients, and people can contribute ingredients to finish that stone soup, which will feed up to 35 people in your raider party. And if you spend 10 seconds eating, you get well-fed buff and main stat, etc. So this to me is kind of cool. They're exploring feasts in a new way. There's always that one person in your raid who's always been the person who has to provide the feasts. You could technically divvy that job up now and go, guess what? You're responsible for getting the fish, and you're responsible for getting this part of the feast and that part of the feast. And you basically set out a kettle and everyone contributes into it, and you end up with a cool little, you know, feasty for everybody. So I like that they're experimenting with what the feast could be, and that we have a potluck in the game.
Yeah, it's awesome, and it's a great reference to, like, the fact that it's called Stone Soup is super cool. Like, yeah. I love that reference. Although it's not the good feast buff, right? It's the medium feast buff.
I mean, they can't make it the good feast buff, because if they did, then it becomes the correct way to do it. Or if it's better than the good, I mean, they might end up buffing this. We don't know. They might end up making it better than the current good feast buff, because when it comes down to it, you don't want to have something where it's a chore to do before every single pull, right? You want to be able to just drop a good feast.
Well, yeah, maybe if there's some way that you could, like, but see, I feel like they could solve that with item design, right? Because you have a thing that everybody can put stuff into, right, until it becomes this other item. So then make it a thing that's like essentially a mage table, and then you can just pull stacks out of it, right? Like that would be something like that could work, cool. And then you could have it. You could put it at parity. Yeah, put it at parity with the good feast, and then it would be
pull
like
35 out of it. So a 20-person raid can have all this extra feast. Yeah.
Right. And like, cool. I feel like it would be better if that was the correct way to do it, is to have everybody contribute, because, you know, I'm a sucker for anything that's like a guild or a team working together to do something. Right. Like, I think it would be awesome. I love the idea of this item in general. Yeah. And I think, like, it could be cool for when you're in just total farm mode and it's like, whatever, we're not going to use a good feast tonight. Like, everybody throw some meat and fish in here, and let's just do like a stone soup feast. Like,
All right, well, where's Morgan? We got to get Morgan back in here so we can tell him about the idea for stone soup.
And then he can explain to me why my dumb idea is impossible to implement, because I don't understand how the game is built, and the tech will never work like that in a million years.
Well, but I think that'd be awesome to and once it's completed, be able to click on it like a mage table, and you get a bowl of stone soup that you can then have in your inventory as an item, and you can then, it's obviously soul bound, so you can't sell it or anything, and then you can,
have it disappear after logout or whatever. I mean, just have it like any other conjured item. Yeah. I mean, I love this thematically. I love that it's it's totally true to the the folklore of stone soup, and it has a really cool use for the party, and it helps everybody help each other. It's super cool. It's just the 20 stat just means it's not really going to be what people want to use. So it might be cool for off nights, or when you're in deep farm and nobody's really trying to super optimize at the expense of like valuable mats or just their own time.
Yeah. As far as crafting goes, though, they've added a whole bunch of crafting materials, obviously, as you'd expect, and all of them have very prehistoric names. There's proto-flesh and proto-weave and placoderm, and it's just all his very, very like dinosaur-esque progenium and protogenic. And it's like, okay, I get it. Proto-fiber. It's all centered around this very like original, very old, the materials of the universe coming together to make something. And so, I mean, I'm down for catching some precursor placoderm fish. That's cool.
Right.
Why not?
It's kind of interesting that like they spell out that there's like new ore, for example, but there's no new like blacksmithing recipes listed. So I wonder if they're forthcoming.
They're coming.
Or if you'll just need them for the new optional reagents, because we know there's some new stuff to modify your items, like a new crafter's mark and a new crafter's mark in the first ones.
Yeah.
And also that the blue quality gear recipes, like craftable gear, is going to have an additional optional reagent slot. So maybe you need the new, materials to activate that somehow or something, or maybe we're going to get a bunch of brand new recipes. Maybe. I hope so. I think we, I think if we're getting all that stuff, then I would like to be able to just make like a straight up brand new set of gear or something.
Well, one of the items that you can actually make as an alchemist that they're putting in, which is also a pretty exciting thing. I have to point out, this is very cool. It's called Sustaining Armor Polish. All right. And if you make this, it increases the duration of your flasks, elixirs, and food buffs. So the concept is you get all of your buffs up, and if they're going to expire, as opposed to reapplying all of those buffs, you use your Sustaining Armor Polish, and it increases the duration of all of these things again. So it bumps it all out. So there's a reward for staying alive through a dungeon or through a raid as long as you can, because you just keep using your armor polish to just keep extending out these buffs as much as you can. And even then, it might have been cheaper to craft Sustaining Armor Polish and drink one flask and then just use the polish to extend the flask throughout the night than it is to drink another flask. That might be another cool thing there. So, I think
anything like that is super cool. Yeah, I love that.
All right. As far as the rest of this goes, the Jailer's Gauntlet is supposedly in there. You can actually go in and try out the Jailer's Gauntlet inside Torghast. So be sure you're checking that out on PTR if that's something you're wanting to hop into. It's basically you run through a series of increasingly challenging bosses across 8 floors. And so you just keep going in and challenging bosses. I think it's cool. I haven't tried it out yet, but I love the concept. So I want to get in there and try it, and we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, cool concept, different way to kind of experience Torghast. Torghast feels unfortunately like a mode that just never really found its footing, never really realized its potential. I think it's very good now compared to the state that it launched in. The problem being that it turned a lot of people off who just really have no interest in checking it out anymore. I think when you have like a maxed out box of many things and you have all these different ways to approach it and try to optimize your score, that there's a lot of gameplay there, and it is fun to me, even though I've only really done it in tank spec, which is kind of a plodding style, right? You're not moving through too fast. You're rarely in like severe danger, but you're also moving pretty slow. I don't know how that's going to work with the boss rush mode, because it's like am I going to be able to kill the bosses in any kind of amount of time that's reasonable early on? So I'm not going to really have any powers, I assume. Like I haven't seen it, so I don't know like how you get powers. You can obviously in tank spec, you can get a lot of DPS powers over the course of a run if that's what you build for. And then you can definitely take out bosses. But if all you're doing is fighting bosses, man, that could be a little bit sloggy for tank specs. So, but I mean, I think there are certain players who will really gravitate towards this kind of thing. I think ultimately the question just constantly becomes for Torghast, like, what is the payoff, right? Like you have the initial experience and maybe it's cool, or maybe it's not as cool as it could be, or maybe it's surprisingly cool, but then why do you want to do it again? Why do you want to do it the next time? And I think that's something that we've had issues with in terms of the answers we've gotten from the game itself, right? I guess we'll see with this mode. It's a cool addition. I'm all for any way to mix up Torghast or present it in different ways. I think there's a lot of value in the feature, and I sort of hope that they take this, quote unquote endless dungeon like roguelite concept forward and continue to tinker with it and make it a cool part of WoW. Torghast had some bumps along the way, and I think there's some obvious pitfalls not to fall into next time. But I don't think that means they should totally scrap the concept, because I think some of it really works well. Like the challenge bar and the kind of ever ramping challenge mixed with the ability to break the rules and get all these cool powers you're not supposed to have. Like there's something about that is undeniably like fun at a baseline level, but it's like putting the whole WoW wrapper around it and making it part of the game that I think has been a problem this last year or so.
Yeah, it's a challenge for Torghast. I just hope that this new mode at least lets people try it, and hopefully if there's someone who wasn't doing it much before Box Many Things whatever came in, they're then getting a little bit more hooked into it, because it is a pretty fun experience once you actually start on getting those unlocks and getting stuff going for Box Many Things. So I would recommend checking it out if it's something you haven't been doing for a while, and if you're looking at coming back to the game, whatever it is. Okay, Jason, the next change that they announced is going to free up the most macros and free up the most add-on stuff I have seen in a long time with changes to UI. This is one of the biggest UI inclusions I have seen in World of Warcraft in its existence. Two things. One is click casting, which means this allows you to cast certain spells by simply clicking on a unit frame. And what I mean by this is, if you have your party or group open, or your raid, on your unit frames on your screen, you can actually go into your options menu and go under interface options to combat, and inside the key bindings menu, and bind like your mouse button 3 or your mouse wheel or your right click or your left click to certain abilities for your class. One of the macros that I run at the moment is when I right click on a unit frame, for me, I actually cast Innervate on that person if they're a healer. So if the person is a healer and I right click on their unit frame, it puts Innervate on them. And I do that because I don't always want to set up a macro for each. I mean, sometimes you have situations where the person who I am responsible for innervating, who I have a macro for, so I just hit a button and it instantly innervates that person, dies. Well, if that person's dead, I now need another way to cast Innervate easily on the other random healer who goes innervate me instead when that actually comes up. And so the easiest way for me to do that is bind Innervate to right click, which means anyone I right click on the unit frames, that gets Innervate. You could also do that for decursing or dispelling. That's another really helpful one to do. If you're someone who needs to decurse or dispel a lot, binding a key on your mouse to just mouse over and right click on their name, or left click, or mouse wheel, or third mouse button, or fifth mouse button, or whatever it is, will allow you to actually cast that dispel, is big. This is super, super, super helpful. Now, there's another option, which is actually mouse over casting on unit frames. Now, this is something that's going to free up the most macros for every healer in the game, as well as for someone like myself. And obviously, I probably won't change too much about my playstyle this expansion. This will be while I'm leveling next expansion, I'm going to set all this stuff up so I get the habit going before we're into like serious raid content. But something that a lot of people run right now is, as opposed to just taking an ability and putting it on your bar, they take the ability and make a macro that lets them cast that ability when they press the button that it's bound to, and on whoever your mouse cursor is either over in the game or over on the unit frames. Which means that if I want to heal somebody, let's say I'm casting Rejuves, which are they're one global, right? What Rejuvenation is one global, so they go up pretty quickly, and I want to blanket a certain group in the raid, right? I can have Rejuve with my mouse over, down to number 4 on my keyboard if I wanted to, and I would just move my mouse over each person without having to click on them and target them. I could just move my mouse over each person in that group and press 4, and it would just cast the spell on those people as long as I was doing that. And you can do that with people who are physically moving around on your screen in front of you, or you can do it on your unit frames, which is where most healers end up doing it, is on their unit frames. This is super helpful for a lot of things. It's helpful for if you want to cast a stun on an enemy, you can do that on a mouse over. So if you just mouse over someone and hit a button, you'll actually stun that enemy. So if you're actively fighting someone as melee, sometimes it's easier than mousing over their unit frame, if you are someone who runs something like that, to just mouse over the person who's in front of you and do it. You can do that with the spells. You can do that with anything. So when I'm playing the game, one of the biggest mouse overs I use currently as a boomkin is all of my Moonfires and Sunfires are mouse overs. So whenever I Moonfire and Sunfire something, I'm mousing over an enemy and pressing a button, and it's putting a Moonfire on them. So as opposed to me having to target an enemy and cast a Moonfire, and target an enemy and cast a Moonfire, I just move my mouse over top of each one I want to do and press the button. And the biggest advantage to this is if I'm fighting a boss, I want to keep putting my damage into the boss. And when an ad spawns that's just going to get cleaved down, I just want to put dots on it. I don't want to stop targeting the boss, which means that I can keep my target, because I don't click on anything else, on the boss while I cast on other things. So I'm actually able to cast on 5 or 6 other mobs easily without losing my target, which is huge. Because often you're clicking on something and then you're trying to get back over to the thing you want to click on, and trying to get that thing retargeted is tricky. So these are huge changes for UI elements. These are things that people actively use add-ons and macros for every day when they play the game. It's something where someone makes a new character, one of the first things they do for some players is make a mouse over macro for an ability. It's like one of the first things they do. So incorporating this into the game and incorporating click casting into the game is huge. This is really big changes for the game.
Yeah, I mean, there are entire add-ons that have lived and died on their ability to offer these two features.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is great quality of life for players. I think it opens up a lot of doors for play styles for people who maybe aren't savvy at like navigating and setting up add-ons.
Or macros even, yeah.
Yeah, who like just want to play the game, but like they can't really navigate that layer of it. Like this, if they can set this up, if the game makes it like straightforward, easy to do, then you know that opens up entirely new avenues for them. And it's also like it's a huge accessibility win for people that can't like operate mouse and keyboard with a high degree of like proficient APM, right? Like being able to like quickly click on a whole bunch of different things all over the screen at once. It's like, you know where stuff needs to go. The game's going to help you get there. I could even see this being a big win with controller support, right? Like this opens the door to that even that much more, because now you can use, you know, just kind of use the pointer in conjunction with buttons on the controller instead of having to, you know, constantly switch targets and everything. The target switching, that's sort of the core of WoW combat, has become a sticking point over the years, you know, in terms of accessibility, in terms of stuff like controller support, and just in terms of the gameplay overall. It's why so many add-ons and stuff have circumvented it over the years, because like it works very well for WoW's combat system, but it's like it's kind of old-fashioned. It's not really the way more modern games tend to work. So I love to see this, and I think it opens up a lot of doors for people to check out different play styles, and I think it's a massive accessibility win. I mean, using mouse and keyboard to play a complex game like WoW is not, you know, it's not a simple thing, and just breaking down those types of barriers and making the game meet people, you know, halfway, or you know, meeting people more where they're at with the ability to customize their experience is huge. This is kind of stuff that, like, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, could you ever imagine this being like baseline? Wow. I didn't think we'd ever see the day, to be honest.
No.
I think every player of WoW benefits from this.
Yeah.
Whether you're using this to streamline your gameplay experience, whether you're using this because you need accessibility accommodations, or if you're not using this at all. Because if other people around you are using it, they're benefiting, and you're benefiting from them benefiting from it. Yeah. I guess unless you're PvPing against them. But other than that, like this is just a huge win for everybody who plays WoW. So I love to see it. They made such big strides in quality of life and accessibility in terms of UI in these last couple years. I want to say the last like 2-3 years, it's been obviously a big focus of the team, and we've seen some really great inclusions. And these are two of the biggest ones. I think this is just amazing stuff for WoW players.
An example for this week alone where it's massive is when we have to deal with explosive orbs. When I'm DPSing a boss and explosive orbs start spawning, me to not have to move my target and try and target that explosive orb to do something, just being able to put my mouse over top of the explosive orb and press my Moonfire button and then go back to DPSing the boss is amazing inconvenience. Having to untarget the boss to target an explosive orb, cast an instant cast spell, and then retarget the boss to do it is often something that loses DPS time versus just casting Wrath. Oh, Moonfire that, casting Wrath. Like, that is so much easier than the additional clicks and retargeting and other things that happen. So
of course you have really those like those tab target oopsies, that happens to everybody. You hit something that wasn't even in combat, or you cycle too far through and now you can't get back to the thing you wanted or whatever. I mean, again, whether or not you really like opt into this or take advantage of it, like we all benefit from this being baseline.
Agreed. Other than that, I would just say if you're someone who's interested in checking out PTR, there's a whole bunch of quest chain stuff that went in. Like I said, it doesn't go up past the second legendary stuff, so you can't get the second legendary yet, but there's a ton in there for you to explore. If you want to start looking at your daily loop, just be sure you go to you always know the name of the guy inside Oribos who sells everything. Flask-Guitar. Go to Flask-Guitar.
Flask-Guitar is what he's usually called. I don't know if they're all sort of brethren of Tauren vendors in tuxedos that sell stuff. So I don't know if is the name of the one in 9.2 on here. There's Setzer Tauren, who's in Oribos that sells the armor sets. I don't know what if Setzer Tauren sells anything else, but it's the long Flask-Guitar lineage lives on 9.2 PTR.
So be sure you're heading to Oribos and just buying up everything you want. You can copy your character over. So if you're someone who's like, hey, I want to take my exact character, put it on PTR, you can do that. That feature is available there for you to hop in and do it. What was really weird to me is my PTR character from PTR for 9.1.5 still existed. So they've been
doing that now. Like they don't like fully wipe PTR. It's the same realm names and like existing copied characters from previous patches or whatever. They stay there, which is cool in a way because like you can instantly jump into PTR. But like it's it can be very jarring depending on how old that character copy is.
I hopped in. I'm like, this character's in Guardian spec and the gear's a lot different. And what is going? I was like, oh my god, it's my PTR character from 9.1.5. Cool. So that's a thing. That was one of the other things they threw in there. But with that, guys, we're gonna play a quick sounder for our patrons, and we'll be right back. Hi everyone, I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today, I'm giving a special shout out to Arajian, Bob, Celian, Jeff, Kapawi, Mibble the Mighty, and Shorel. Thank you. This sounder is for you. Our Patreon is located over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. We want to give a big shout out and thank you to our newest patrons, Micah L. and Brian F., and to Greg for upping their pledge. Thank you, Greg. Really appreciate that. You all help support the show and help boost our listenership and the content we can create and all the good things. So our patrons, we thank you. It is wonderful that you support us the way you do.
Yes, welcome new patrons aboard, and thank you, Greg, for increasing your pledge. And the support means a lot. It really it helps the show tremendously. It helps us put out the best quality WoW show we can, and also get you more episodes of it in the process, right? So
Really appreciate all the support, and really just great vibes around the show lately, which is weird to say because the game is in such a weird place and the company is in such a weird place, and it's been difficult for us to navigate, these last 4 or 5 months here. And I can't pretend that it hasn't been, right. Like it's these are difficult topics to talk about, and like my personal interest in playing the game on a daily basis has fluctuated a lot lately, but I'm certainly invested in the current and future state of the game, and I'm looking forward to the future of the game. But our patrons and our listeners have been incredibly supportive and have had great input and insight and feedback about, what we're doing and the conversations we're having and what's going on with the game and what their experiences are. And it's just very rewarding to hear from you all and to hear, the show as part of your WoW experience and how your WoW experiences feed back into the show. It's really great. And it maintains my optimism for the future of WoW. Like we have weathered a really weird storm here over the last, I would say, year and a half, going back to like deep Shadowlands beta. Obviously BFA was very up and down as well. So it's been a minute. We've been through it lately, but I think, there's some light peeking out the end of the tunnel. And I think part of the reason why the show has been consistent and been what people expect from us is because of the patrons supporting us and keeping us apprised of what they're doing and what they're feeling about the game and everything like that. Just getting a picture of that segment of the player base.
Yeah, I agreed. And you want to stay tuned for our December event scheduling. Obviously, we have our call-in show / Q&A that'll be happening this month. We're still sorting out a date for when that'll happen, but we want to be sure we schedule it in a time where people can actually participate, hopefully. We still haven't decided whether that's going to be sort of like towards the 18th kind of range, or that's going to be somewhere towards the like weird holiday week range. It will really come down to what our patrons think and what we think about what that should be. So if you have a particular preference, feel free to hop into our Discord. Go to thestartingzone.com/Discord and let us know there, or send us a message on Patreon and we will check that out and hear what your feedback is. If there's a certain time that works a little bit better for you, for us, it's just sort of based around like when work stops / when holiday travel is happening, etc. So we'll see what happens with that. But thank you again. All right, folks, if you've enjoyed this episode of The Starting Zone, consider heading on over to your iTunes, your Apple Podcasts, and leave us a 5-star review. They really help out our show. They boost our listenership and move us up those Apple charts. And we also love hearing reviews written by our listeners and reading them here on the show. This one comes in from Evilex on Lightbringer USA, entitled Big Fan of the Show, and says, as the title says, I've been downloading the show for a while, and I am a big fan of Spencer and Jason's commentary of their World of Warcraft experience. I always appreciate their perspective of the show highlights. I always appreciate their perspective of the show highlights. I said it's supposed to be and. I'm going to change your review slightly. There we go. I always appreciate their perspective, and the show highlights all the ways we can appreciate a game that a lot of us have played, sometimes on and off, for over 17 years. Their rundown of weekly events are always a great reminder of things to get caught up on when I don't have time to research myself. Your show and insights are truly appreciated. Keep up the great work, and big thanks, Evilex on Lightbringer. Well, thank you very much, Evilex, for writing in and leaving us that big old 5-star. That helps us out a lot. So thank you very much.
Absolutely great to hear from you. Thanks for taking the time, and thanks for making us part of your WoW routine.
Yeah. All right, that's going to wrap up episode 492 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. You can contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question at our email at thestartingzone@gmail.com, or reach out to us on Twitter or in Discord, like I mentioned earlier, thestartingzone.com/Discord. Click on the link there and join up. If you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, there's lots of sales happening over at tpublic.com/stores/thestartingzone. Where you can pick up shirts and mugs and stickers and all sorts of fun stuff like that with our logos on them. And yeah, with holiday sales happening, it's just like a steady flow of sales. So be sure you're checking in, getting your 33% off or 20% off or whatever it is this week. for checking that stuff out. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
Best place to find me, as always, is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald, so come say hi.
Great. If you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey, or you can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and jobs done.